Hello again, baseball fans, and welcome to week 2 of the MLB Draft Weekend Review. I am your host, Kris Dunn, sitting alongside my co-host, Joe Doyle. And Joe, it looks like the Major League Baseball Players Association and Major League Baseball are not going to come to an agreement by the end of the day, which means we're probably looking at a shortened season. So I'm going to ask you this question to lead off the show here, Joe. Let's hypothetically say that there's a month of free time added to your calendar. What are you going to do with an additional month where you don't have to worry about anything baseball related? Go.
I mean, I could gradually get worse and worse at golf. Every hour I put in seems to get a little worse. No, but I do hope they come to a resolution here soon. It's been tough just, sitting on pins and needles watching this news go by. But man, a month of dedicating my life to my real job. That's not a fun proposition.
Maybe golf could become your real job. Apparently you've got a little ways to go.
I might be a little over the hump, but
I just got
never say never.
My wife, shout out to my wife, for Christmas, she got me a few lessons and a golf fitting. So I just recently got fitted, new clubs, everything. I've got them already lined up, ready to go, just waiting to pull the trigger on, $1,500 and just my irons, not even including the driver or a new putter, any of that. But to your point, it's hard to pull the trigger on $1,500 irons when you're just not that good at the game.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a lot of money to spend on the rage cage. So if you want to lock yourself in it, be my guest.
Hopefully we don't have to wait too much longer. We all want there to be a resolution, regardless of what it might be. We want a Major League Baseball season. But even if that's not going to happen in the immediate future, who cares, right, Joe? We've got college baseball going on right now. Week 1 was fantastic. Now we're at week 2. And we've seen a lot of the same in week 2 that we saw in week 1, especially if you're a fan of the Florida State Seminoles. You saw some dominant pitching performances. You've seen a lot of the same if you are a fan of power hitting freshmen in the ACC. Tommy White has 9 home runs now. And we've seen some things start to turn around a little bit. So we'll get into all of that. Guys, always appreciate the support. If you have any questions for us throughout the show, please be sure to include those questions. You can submit those questions in the comment section on the YouTube channel, and we will get to your questions live on air. So all the interaction is fantastic. We had some great questions last week. I've already got a couple questions lined up that I saw, at least one question that I saw coming through Twitter before we even went on the air, Joe. So I'll get your thoughts on that.
Nice.
But before any of that, we'll start and we'll go into the latest top 25, right? So we're going to go top 25 based on D1 baseball. And so here's a quick look at the top 25. I wouldn't say there's a lot of, I wouldn't say there was a lot of movement. I think after week 1, there was significantly more movement, right? Because the preseason rankings were just that. They were preseason. They're kind of static. After week 1, we saw a little bit of movement. I don't know that there's as much movement from week 1 to week 2 as there was from the preseason to week 1. But let's take a look here at the top 25 rankings. Again, per D1 baseball, Texas comes in at number 1. When you haven't lost a game all year and you were the number 1 team heading into the season, no surprise, they're still in at number 1. Ole Miss, Arkansas, Oklahoma State, Vanderbilt round out the top 5. Stanford, LSU, NC State, Mississippi State, and Florida State round out the top 10. And then, as you can see there, the rest of the top 25. Joe, I'm going to move over to you here with one question. Of the undefeated teams, NC State, Georgia, and Oregon State, those undefeated teams that are not the Texas or the Ole Miss at the top there, of those 3 undefeated teams, again, NC State, Georgia, and Oregon State, which one of those teams do you feel is better positioned to potentially make a run at Omaha?
So I try to take bias out of this being in the Pacific Northwest, but I do genuinely believe that Oregon State is a bit of a dark horse this season. as it pertains to Omaha. You look at the roster, you look at the pitching staff, you look at the lineup, and they check a lot of boxes. It's a veteran group of starting pitchers. They've got depth in the rotation, and all three of those starting pitchers are going to get drafted in Will Frisch and Jake Fennigs and Cooper Jerpy, and they've got more behind those guys. And Frisch isn't even entirely healthy yet, but with Jacob, what Jacob Melton is doing, and Travis Bazana at the top, and Meckler in there, and Justin Boyd, they've got a formidable lineup. It's not a great lineup, but with the pitching staff that they've got lined up behind them, it seems like a team that is really, really tough to beat twice on any given weekend. And so I would probably go with them, but I do like what NC State has in their rotation as well. I fear a little bit that they're being carried by Thomas the Tank Engine just a little more than I think people are recognizing just yet.
What are your thoughts on Georgia? I feel like they're a team that wasn't discussed a lot, especially in terms of the SEC. When you look at Ole Miss, you look at Arkansas, you look at Mississippi State, LSU getting a lot of recognition, certainly for their offensive prowess. Is this Georgia team? Look, no one's going to go undefeated the entire season, but is Jonathan Cannon enough to lead this Georgia team, even in that, sort of very, very difficult SEC?
I think so. Jonathan Cannon has been really good this year, and they've got some other really nice pieces in Will Childers and, some other guys. Dylan Ross is their Sunday guy, and I like Jack Gowan, I like Michael Polk. So they've got some good arms in that rotation and in the back end of that bullpen. I just wonder whether or not Georgia is going to be able to score enough runs in their conference, and whether or not, a guy like Dylan Ross at the back of that rotation, who has been susceptible to walks, whether or not that's going to be enough to kind of stand the test of time.
All right. And there's a team in here that a lot of people are probably looking at this list, and by now you've probably had a chance to go through the entire list and may or may not have some questions. But one question that a lot of people might have when they look at this list: who the heck is Sacramento State?
Yeah. No, Sacramento State is they have always been on the radar for 3 or 4 years. I mean, every year they seem to beat up on ranked teams, but they've got a good roster. I mean, over at Prospects Live, I mean, our top 300, we had Jorge Bajorquez, their shortstop, ranked in the top 300. We had Eli Saul as a top 100 or top 150 guy. So they've got some nice pieces, and they've got some explosive arms in their bullpen that can close out a game at the end of the ball game. So with the Friday night starter that they've got, the bullpen that they've got, and the top of the lineup that Sacramento State's able to throw out there, they're not a team to be reckoned with. And what they did against Long Beach State this weekend was not a joke. They're real.
So then I guess that, having said that, because there's two narratives here, right? One is the rise of Sacramento State, obviously into the top 25 here. And then the other narrative is sort of on the flip side of that. The inverse is the fall of Long Beach State, having come into the weekend 2-1, looking really good, and then just unable to win a single game.
Yeah. So Long Beach State is interesting. I still really believe in Long Beach State. I still think they're a team that could be reckoned with in the super regionals and in Omaha potentially. But they've got Luis Ramirez at the very top, who's incredibly talented, and he could be a Friday night guy for anyone in the country. I think Eddie Saldivar was a really impressive piece on weekend one, kind of setting the table for them at the top of the lineup. And he didn't have as big a week here in week two. I still believe in Long Beach State. I still think they have the pieces, especially at the back end of the bullpen with Devereaux Harrison. So we're going to have to see what happens. But frankly, I don't expect Long Beach State to fall out of the top 25 at any point soon. I expect them to have a much better week here.
You don't think at any point they'll fall out of the top 25?
I don't think so. With the schedule that they've got lined up, I think they're going to still be able to rack up some impressive wins, and I think they're going to buoy in that 15 to 25 range for the entire season, to be completely honest with you.
Okay, interesting, because I remember last week we were talking about East Carolina having fallen to number 25, and I remember towards the end of last week's show, we were talking about East Carolina and how they had 4 games this weekend, and I felt like they had to go 3-1 or 4-0 in order to risk not falling out of the top 25. Certainly East Carolina goes 2-2 on the weekend, and sure enough, they fall out of the top 25. So it's interesting. You mentioned the schedule of Long Beach State and how it does bode well for them a little bit moving forward. So hopefully they can. It is interesting to see a team that's 2-4 inside the top 25. I'm sure there's a lot of teams out there with a 5-2 record or a 5-1 record or a 4-2 record, mid-major team even, that are looking at a 2-4 Long Beach State saying, well, wait a minute here, what about us?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's tough.
When you beat up a top 10 team like Mississippi State twice and you take down Landon Sims and you hold that offense to, almost nothing over the entire weekend, I think you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. Sacramento State is a good team, and I'm glad to see that D1 baseball is not only giving Sacramento State the due that they deserve, but also keeping Long Beach State around as well. It's a bad weekend.
So one team that did not have a bad weekend at all are the folks up in Knoxville. So if you are a fan of the Tennessee Volunteers and you saw anything that transpired over this weekend against Iona, I feel like you walked away from this weekend saying, I own those Gales, right? Because Tennessee dropped 64 over a 3-game span. I believe they outscored, I forget what it was. They were plus 45 or something.
There was some bloodshed. It was not a good weekend for Iona.
Is this Tennessee team, is this just the product of playing a team that's not very good? Is this Tennessee team really capable of that sort of offensive outburst, or is this kind of a little bit somewhere in between?
No, Tennessee is that good. Tennessee is that good, and we talked last week about whether or not LSU had the best lineup in college baseball. I still believe LSU has the best lineup in college baseball, but Tennessee's got to be in the conversation in that top 2, top 3, at least top 5. I mean, you go up and down. Jordan Beck is a top 50 pro prospect with prodigious power, their right fielder. Drew Gilbert's in left field. He's got big power from the left side of the plate. Seth Halverson and Blade Tidwell aren't even healthy yet, but Ben Joyce he's just an enigma in the bullpen, hitting 103, 104 miles an hour. I mean, Ben Joyce is a monster. And then you look at the rest of that lineup, and Trey Lipscomb has been maybe the best hitter or a top 3 hitter in college baseball so far. And then you look at guys like Evan Russell and all of these different players. I mean, it's just a juggernaut.
I'm going to throw out 2 teams, and I want you to tell me which offensive performance you were more impressed with this past weekend. And really even some of the players you mentioned. Looking at Tennessee with the production they got from Trey Lipscomb, Evan Russell, Cortland Lawson, Jordan Beck, versus what you saw from the likes of Georgia Tech and Kevin Parada and Drew Compton and Chandler Simpson. Which one of those were you, I guess, more impressed with? Obviously, Tennessee scored more runs. Which one of those offenses were you more impressed with this weekend?
I'm a bigger fan of Georgia Tech's offense. They put the game in motion. Chandler Simpson he's a demon on the base paths. I mean, that guy could steal 50 or 60 bags this year, maybe more. Jake DeLeo looked really good. Kevin Parada has looked really good. And then they got some thumpers with Stephen Reed and I'm trying to remember the name of the other kid in the middle of that Georgia Tech lineup. But yeah, Georgia Tech's got some power. They've got some speed. I think Tennessee's got ultimately the more formidable lineup. But I mean, both of those lineups are stacked. And at any time you can put Kevin Parada in the middle of it, you feel pretty good about your chances.
Yeah, so we'll get into Kevin Parada a little bit more here in a second, because I want to get into our top performers, right? We did this last week with our top 5. We're not going to say that these are the 5 best performances. I don't want you guys to think that that's what this is. This is not, Joe and I saying these were the 5 players that performed better than anyone else. This is completely subjective. These are just simply 5 of the better performances from this past weekend, and guys that, we think are worth mention and worth spotlighting. So we'll get right into it here, Joe, with our top 5 hitters from this past weekend here. So let's take a look. Kevin Parada, as you mentioned, Georgia Tech, he's our 15th ranked prospect in the 2022 draft class over at Prospects Live. Guys, if you have not had a chance to check out that list, you can see the top 300 draft prospects for the upcoming draft class at prospectslive.com, as well as a lot of other great stuff there too. So you want to get to know these guys a little bit more, head on over to Prospects Live and check out the top 300 prospects list. You'll see Kevin Parada comes in at number 15. But then again, there is Trey Lipscomb. And then what about Chase DeLauter here, Joe? Finally, can we get off the Chase DeLauter hate train and give the man a little bit of love?
So I do want to point out, we did have a question come in just now from JHook703, and you can throw that on the screen really quick, just so it's clear. This is an MLB draft show. It's an MLB draft review show. Tommy Tanks, Thomas the Tank Engine, as I like to call him. If this were 2024, Tommy would be number one on this list back to back weeks. So yeah, the kid can mash, but unfortunately not draft eligible for a few more years. So this is just going to be guys that we want you to focus on for the upcoming draft. And that's why he's not, he wouldn't have a ranking anyways. So, but hey,
well, let's be honest. If we had the same guy on the list every week after week after week after week, I guess, we could just start taking weeks off, right? Like we could take a week off, Joe, and we could just go, we could work on our golf game and we could just throw graphics of Tommy White on the screen and let everybody go buck wild.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly not wrong. Tommy White has been the best player in college baseball, and it really hasn't even been remotely close, which is kind of the interesting thing here about Kevin Parada. I mean, you look at Kevin Parada, the guy has been just destroying the baseball this year. 11 for 17 this week, 4 homers, 3 doubles, 7 extra base hits over the course of 4 games, 15 RBIs, a walk, and a stolen base for good measure. Kevin Parada has been the second best hitter in college baseball this year. And more with the people that I've spoken to, I'm not even sure it's going to matter if folks are worried about Kevin Parada not being able to play catcher at the next level. He might be able to. It's kind of a 50-50 split. He's a good athlete back there. But the bat is so good, you can kind of draft him and just say, we'll figure out where we're going to put him later. The bat is real. So kudos to Kevin Parada on a huge week. Definitely doing his draft stock some good fortune here early on this year. Trey Lipscomb, really interesting player. Been more of a part-time player at Tennessee over the first few years that he's been there, but more and more he's getting full-time opportunities across the infield for the Volunteers. A Volunteers offense that we talked about scored 64 runs, 10 for 12, 2 homers, 3 triples, 4 doubles. That's 9 extra base hits out of 10 hits this week, 14 RBIs and a stolen base. He's been kind of the guy that's making the entire lineup move and keeping it moving for the Volunteers. He was not ranked in our top 300, mostly because Trey Lipscomb wasn't a full-time player going into this year. I don't think, he's been kind of a pop-up, has really burst onto the scene. So excited to see where he goes this year. I'm liking what I'm seeing from him, both in terms of versatility and at the plate. Chase DeLauter, Kris, last week, we said, stop panicking. Everyone take a chill pill. Parker Messick and Bryce Hubbard are just nasty. Well, Chase DeLauter, a multi-hit game, 5 games in a row now. He has 10 hits in his last 18 at-bats. 8 for 15 this week, a home run, a double, 8 RBIs, 5 walks, and just 2 strikeouts over the last 5 games. So much better showing from Chase. He's certainly back on the right track, and I'd expect to see more of that game power continue to come out as he gets more and more comfortable. Jacob Melton, man, Oregon State, we teased this kid last week. 6 for 11, 2 homers, a triple, 9 RBIs. They only played 3 games. They took Sunday off. Melton has been a beast. He's got 4 homers on the season. He's hitting the ball hard. He's playing center field for Oregon State. He's one of the few guys on this list that I'm comfortable commenting now will be moving up. He will no longer be at 210. I think he's a pretty surefire breakthrough candidate in college baseball this year, and his tools are showing out pretty loud. And then Colby Halter, this kid has been a stud. He's been on prospect lists since he was 2019. There was a lot of hype around him getting drafted. Huge week for Halter. Plays second base, plays shortstop. He's played a little bit of third base. 10 for 17, 3 homers, which is not the Colby Halter profile, 2 doubles, 6 RBIs, 2 walks, and a stolen base. Another guy that, we've kind of had floating in that, round 3 to round 5 range. And if he continues to hit like this, that draft stock could go up just a little bit further.
Do you have any concern at all? So a couple guys I want to kind of circle back to here, but Colby Halter, do you have any concern with the Colby Halter? And because he's going to get a lot of, I guess, utility time, he's going to see time all over the diamond. Is there any concern at all moving forward that we don't get to see enough of what he's capable of doing at any one position, and that could potentially hurt his draft stock? Or does it not matter because no matter what, the profile is just going to play regardless?
Well, I mean, he was good last year. He wasn't great. I think he hit about 303, didn't show the power, moved around the diamond a bit, but he's kind of fringy at shortstop. He's above average at second base. The arm plays better at second base. The lateral mobility plays better at second base. I'm not really worried about where he's going to play on the diamond. I think it's a fair assumption that if the draft were to come around, right now, it wouldn't really matter that he hasn't shown enough at shortstop, because in college baseball, and to get drafted, you got to hit, you got to bat, you got to thump, you got to prove that you can, continue to contribute offensively at the next level. And I think that's something that Colby Halter has been able to do here early on this season. And if he continues to show that he's an offensive force, he's going to get drafted. It doesn't matter. People will figure out where to play him on the infield.
And then before we get out, I just thought it was kind of interesting. We talk about Trey Lipscomb and the performance this past weekend. And it's funny because, putting this together and going over all this with you over the weekend, I didn't even recognize that he had 10 hits and 9 of them were extra bases. That you said that, and that is not something that should be just kind of glossed over. The fact that he went 10 for 12 is amazing. And the fact that he had 3 triples, 4 doubles, and 2 home runs is amazing. But when you look at that and realize that 9 of his 10 hits were for extra bases, like, that's incredible. And over this past weekend alone, he has vaulted himself into second in the nation in terms of runs batted in. The only man that has more RBIs than Troy Lipscomb is obviously Tommy Tanks, has 29. Lipscomb now has 20. So just super impressive weekend from the Volunteers as an entire unit. But obviously, certainly like what we saw here from Trey Lipscomb. Let's move on a little bit to the pitching side of things and some of the pitchers that had a pretty good performance. Yeah, there's a lot of guys.
There's a lot. It was really hard to shrink this down to 5 guys, but we want to keep it kind of compact for you guys.
Yeah, and we want to try to spotlight different guys.
Right, that's a big thing, yeah.
You will notice there is one carryover on this list from last week's list, but we're going to try to spotlight different guys moving forward. So if you're ever wondering why a particular player is not on the list, feel free to throw a question in the comment section, guys. If you don't like the list, if you think that, so-and-so should have been higher, by all means, throw the question in the chat, throw a comment in the chat. We will address it. We want you guys to be interactive here. So here are the top 5 pitching performances that we chose to spotlight here. Jake Brooks at UCLA, Parker Messick. Again, this is one of those names we could probably talk about every single week. Zeke Wood, not a name that we would probably be talking about every single week, not ranked in our top 300 prospects for the 2022 draft. Same with Eli Saul. Again, Joe, we talked about this name earlier with Sacramento State. A lot of people might not know Zeke Wood or Eli Saul. And then Hunter Barco is that carryover from last week. He comes in as our 56th ranked prospect in the upcoming draft. So, Joe, give me your thoughts on this list here and maybe which one of these guys impressed you the most this past week.
Yeah, so I mean, I want to start with Jake Brooks. Jake Brooks was really electric against UC Riverside. Not a guy that probably got enough acclaim going into the year, but the Friday night guy for UCLA, and that's a huge distinction. I mean, UCLA has been a powerhouse program. It's been a powerhouse pitching program for a very, very long time, and UC Riverside is no joke. Jake Brooks goes out 7 innings, 3 hits, 12 Ks. I mean, I don't really know what more you could have asked for from Brooks. Parker Messick, I mean, he was on our board last week, and he was almost too good to not leave off of this board. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but pretty much repeated what he did last week. 7 innings, 1 hit, 13 Ks. Zeke Wood is a guy that I think more people need to pay some attention to, because Texas State generally isn't where you're going to, get a lot of headlines, but Zeke Wood beat up a pretty talented Ohio State roster, pretty talented Ohio State lineup. 7 innings, 1 hit, 10 Ks, 1 walk. He's not ranked, but that might change. This is a guy that has an over-the-top delivery, 89 to 92, touches 93. He's got the slider. He's got the changeup. I think he's a guy that you need to watch out for as maybe one of those deep sleepers that kind of pushes his way up boards as we move forward down the spring. As we already talked about, Sacramento State beats up on a really talented Long Beach State program. Eli Saul goes head to head against Luis Ramirez, who beat Landon Sims the week before, and he upended him. Now Luis Ramirez didn't give up any runs, but neither did Eli Saul. 7 2/3, 4 hits, 9 Ks. He did have 1 walk, and so I think that's a really impressive performance from a guy that not only did we have ranked just outside of the top 300, but I can, with pretty assured nature, tell you that he's going to be moving into that slot when we release our top 400 here coming up soon. And then finally, Hunter Barco. I'm not sure if Hunter Barco was on the board last week. I'm trying to remember if he was, but he was so good against Jacksonville. He dominated. I really liked what I saw from Hunter Barco in week 1. And he seemed to take a step forward in week 2. He touched 95, almost touched a 96, according to a Stalker radar gun a scout that I spoke with that was in the stadium. And the slider was just diabolical. He was putting people on their knees, threw the changeup, 6 innings, 3 hits. He did give up an earned run, but 12 more strikeouts for Hunter Barco. And it feels more and more like, I understand that this is Jacksonville, and I understand he was beating up some, teams that aren't necessarily in the SEC, but he's showing that he has the potential to be a day one guy, and everyone has been looking from Hunter Barco since 2019, and I think we might be there now.
Yeah, and I don't think that we should discount this Jacksonville team either. Look, we saw Jacksonville last week, midweek, get a victory over Florida State. This Jacksonville team plays Florida and Florida State every single year, so they're used to this high level of competition. And a lot of the kids, at a school like Jacksonville are, former teammates of a lot of the guys at Florida or Florida State. So, you have that heightened level of competitiveness a little bit when you have that interstate. I guess you can call it a rivalry just because they're, they play each other regularly. Despite the fact that they're not in the same conference, and traditionally it's not much of a rivalry per se. But there's a lot of guys that are not on this list. As we mentioned, we can't go into all of them, but I know there is one guy that you were very interested in watching last weekend. We talked about last weekend a couple players that we were interested in following, and one of those guys was Bryson Motts. We even showed some scouting video on Bryson Motts last week. 6 innings, 3 hits, 2 walks, 9 Ks. A great performance from him. But I know there's one guy that's not on this list that you really, really want to talk about, Joe. And so I'm going to give you the opportunity to really, speak the praises of one particular pitcher. And I think you know where I'm going with this. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you and let you just go and talk about your boy here.
Yeah, so this winter, we had a big contingency of guys at the Cape Cod League, and all of them went out and saw Adam Mazur at one time or another. And listen, the book was a 6'1", 180, 185 pound, quick arm, electric athleticism, but command was an issue. Didn't know where it was necessarily going. The secondaries were really good, but fastball command was always a question. Adam Mazur over at Iowa has been nothing short of electric early on this year. So this week he goes 7 2/3, 9 strikeouts, 2 walks. Those are the only 2 walks of the season. He didn't walk anyone in week 1. He's got 18 strikeouts on the year, and the fastball that was 91 to 95 on the Cape, he gets over to Iowa, and now is a guy that's 93 to 96. He's touching 97. The slider flashes plus. He's shown a curveball that could be above average with high spin rates. He can turn over and pronate on a changeup. Every week, especially in the first few weeks of the season, we look for guys that are breaking out. We look for guys that are staking their claim as, you might not have heard about me, but now you need to know about me. Adam Mazur at Iowa, to me, and to some of the folks that I've talked to, has gone from like a third or fourth round type of arm talent, but with command issues, he's going to fall to potentially a day one talent. I'm not going to say that he's going to go in day one. It's been 2 weeks. Yeah, he's been dynamic, but it's been 2 weeks. Okay. If the command holds, if this is a guy that suddenly has average to solid average command with that pitch mix and the projection in that quick right arm, it's the type of guy that really takes advantage of a weak college pitching class and finds himself taken in that, the 20 to 40 range if everything works out. So Adam Mazur, if there's a guy that I could encourage anyone to watch moving forward, if you're a draft hound and you like this sort of thing, check in on Iowa on Friday nights, because this kid he's the real deal.
And I think that it's also worth mentioning, once he gets into the Big Ten schedule and he starts going against, conference opponents, I think that's when he'll really be able to sort of stake his claim. I think right now, like you said, we're 2 weeks in, and a lot of times you can't really get a good read. You want to see how guys perform when conference play hits. And right. I think it'll be important, to see, what Mazur can do.
I specifically want to see how he holds up, because Adam Mazur is, like I said, he's 6'1", 180, 185 pounds. Last year, he was 91 to 96. Frankly, last year at South Dakota State, he was 90 to 94. Then he gets to the Cape, he's 91 to 96. Now he gets to Iowa, and he's 93 to 96, 93 to 96, touching 97, averaging 95.5. I mean, he's not hitting a lot of 93s. Okay, we're talking about a lot of 5s and 6s here. I want to see whether or not the command and the velocity can hold over, 60 to 80 innings, because he's done it now over, 12 or 13 innings. What's that look like at 35 innings? What's that look like at 50 innings? Does his arm continue to stretch out and he starts, we start dotting more 7s? I've had area scouts in that region tell me that he's the best pitcher in the Big Ten, and it's really not even close. So really? If he continues to hold the velo, and most importantly, the command continues, I think we've got a good one. I mean, last year, McCabe, I'm trying to remember his first name now, but the kid at Indiana, he was kind of that pop-up, goes to the Northwest League, touches 98, big curveball, high spin rates. He lost his command later in the year, and he fell a few rounds because of it after being mocked maybe in the first round in February and March. This is a guy that's in the exact same boat. High spin rates, great breaking ball, dynamic fastball up to 97. If he continues to show what he has shown just in pure stuff, I mean, you're looking at a first-round pick.
All right, so we can see here, is there anyone else, any other pitchers? I know Mazur was the big one for you. We went over our top 5 there on the graphic, as you guys saw. Is there any other pitchers that you wanted to sort of call out? I know I mentioned Bryson Motts and the performance he had this past weekend. Anyone else on your list that you just were overly impressed with? Maybe a guy on the outside looking in, not a top 300 guy, or maybe somewhere who is in the top 300, but you could see rising up a little bit.
Yeah, I'll call out 2 more people really quick, but I'll make it really short. Quinn Matthews at Stanford, 6 innings, 2 hits, 4 walks, 10 strikeouts against, frankly, an absolutely loaded Arkansas team. It was the best matchup of the week. He was in our top 200 going into the week. He showed well. He's a 6'3" lefty that touched the 94, showed a really good slider, turned over a couple changeups. So Quinn Matthews did very, very well for himself. And then Tristan Vreeling at Gonzaga had kind of a weird opening weekend, but really straightened things out this week. 8 innings, 3 hits. He did give up 1 earned run on 2 walks, but he strikes out at 11. touched 96, and the breaking ball from Tristan Vreeling, the Sunday guy for Gonzaga, very, very good. He's going to be yet another Gonzaga Bulldog to get drafted this year.
Yeah, I feel like Gonzaga is one of those teams where, it started with basketball with them, right? They were this team that, how did Gonzaga become such a basketball powerhouse? And certainly the baseball program is not a powerhouse by definition, but they've certainly been able to pump out some significant talent when it comes to the pitching. So, obviously we talk about Gabe Hughes and we talk about Will Kempner.
Right.
And we'll actually get into, we had some scouts. We had, who was it? Jackson Thomas was up there and caught that Gonzaga game this past weekend, that Gonzaga series this past weekend. So a little bit later on in the show, we'll actually have some video of that. We'll kind of spotlight some of our guys that were out in the fields over the weekend and some of the video that they were able to take. And if you want to check out some of that stuff, you guys can at prospectslive.com. There is the live looks every weekend. All of our guys that are out on the fields, they will put videos together and we will have those live looks for you at prospectslive.com. So you can certainly check that out as well. And if you want all the best bonus content, be sure to go to the Patreon. And for as little as $5 a month, you guys can get some of the best bonus content out there. Whether you are a big fantasy buff or whether you just want some good quality baseball content, the Patreon there for as little as $5 a month. Joe, one thing I do like to do on the show with you, since it's a Monday and it's fresh off the weekend and everyone in the world has a complaint about something or has a comment about something or has some sort of outlandish statement that they want to proclaim based off of something that they saw over the weekend. So here we are for Overreaction Monday for week 2. I've got a couple things that I want to throw out to you. Overreaction Monday. Kevin Parada is the best catching prospect in this draft class.
I would say that's an overreaction. And do I think he's the best bat behind the plate? Yes, I do think he's the best bat. But there are, I think, legitimate questions on whether Kevin's going to be able to stay behind the plate as a pro. And if he does stay behind the plate as a pro, it's really hard for me to foresee him being a better entire package, at least defensively, than a guy like Logan Tanner at Mississippi State. And Hayden Dunhurst at Ole Miss is really good as well. Both of those guys are going to be pro backstops. They're both very, very talented. So while I think Kevin Parada, without a doubt, is the best bat that's currently a catcher at the college level, when you take into account the entire package, I think it's a little bit closer with a couple of those other guys.
All right, so I'm going to follow that up. But before I do, I just want, because I believe that you said that was an overreaction, correct?
I would say yes.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that I heard you correct as I roll this. Now, clearly, I'm not the only one who was excited, because some fan in Section 4
what's going on in center field?
Wild.
That's our boy Will. That's our boy Will, just juicing up a live look that he got this week. Shout out to Will Hofer going and getting some Georgia Tech footage. But like I said, man, I mean, Kevin Parada, and this has kind of been the narrative on Kevin Parada since he was in high school. It might be a plus hit tool. It's at least an above average hit tool, and it's at least above average, maybe plus power. Everything is highly optimized right now. He's getting into his entire bag of tricks. So like I said, I don't think it necessarily matters if Kevin Parada is a catcher at the next level, because he's going to get drafted very high because of the bat.
Okay. I just I want to know who that is.
Has anyone done a wellness check on that?
I hope that someone tracked that kid down. I hope that he got some sort of souvenir. Maybe Will. I wish that Will had went over and interviewed him after that. That would have been fantastic. So I guess since we're on this topic, we'll pull this up. Santee City has a question in the chat, since we are talking about Kevin Parada, and I threw it out there. Is he the best catching prospect in this draft class? And you didn't even mention the guy that I would argue is the sort of 1B to Kevin Parada's 1A, and that's Daniel Susak.
Yeah, Kris, that's because I'm an idiot. More than anything. Daniel Susak is, listen, if Logan Tanner and Hayden Dunhurst are the defenders in this class, and Kevin Parada is the hitter in this class, Santee City kind of hit the nail on the head. Daniel Susak is kind of the best of both worlds. He gets very high marks behind the plate, especially this year. His receiving skills and his athleticism laterally, from the State Farm Classic from this 2 weeks ago, really graded out high from scouting directors that were there. I do think Daniel Susak is a better total package prospect than Kevin Parada is, because like Santee City is kind of suggesting here, he does it all.
So then let's look at this because a lot of people out there are watching this from a dynasty league perspective. They are, they're fans of the show. They're fans of Prospects Live because we provide them with a lot of insight to help them win their dynasty league, right? So Daniel Susak, Kevin Parada, let's fast forward into the first year player draft. Which one of those guys from a fantasy perspective is the better option?
I would take Kevin Parada. I like Kevin Parada's bat just a little bit more than Susak's, but I really do like Daniel Susak's bat, so I don't want to take anything away from that. I think the reason I would go with Parada is because, assuming that he moves off of the catching position, he could move quicker. He could, get into a position like a first base or a third base or a left field where he plays every single day, and you can get that bat in your lineup every single day. I don't think that is definitely going to be the case with Susak. They might take his time, whoever drafts him might take their time with Susak. And if he's a catcher, there's a decent chance that you're only going to get him, 3 or 4 days out of the week. Parada's bat has to be in a lineup.
All right. So then the follow-up question to this, I'm shocked that you think that that's an overreaction about Kevin Parada being the best catcher in the draft. Surely you will agree that the first player selected from the ACC will be Kevin Parada. Is that an overreaction?
That is a bit more of a toss. So we're talking about Kevin Parada, Gavin Cross.
Maybe an arm at Florida State.
You can throw Bryce Hubbard in there. I don't think Parker Messick has the prototype stuff to get to that level. Yeah, I think ultimately you're probably looking at Gavin Cross or you're looking at Kevin Parada. Gavin Cross has been really good this year. He's been able to, he's got 2 triples. He kind of hurt his wrist in the first weekend, and that doesn't seem to have slowed him down at all. Virginia Tech is really cooking. So, yeah, it's really close. It's really, if I were a betting man, I would go with Gavin Cross today just because of his position and his athleticism and the arm. But it's close. If the draft were today, you're talking about like a 5-pick margin there.
Right. And we have Parada at 15. So in our top 300 prospects, we have Parada at 15 and we have Gavin Cross at 11. Now, obviously that is preseason. That's before anything. We're only 2 weeks into the season, but if anything, after 2 weeks, maybe Parada has gone up slightly, maybe from 15. But certainly, like you mentioned, they're both kind of right there. And again, it is the outfield profile should give Gavin Cross a little bit of an advantage. But who knows? We've seen catchers get drafted early a lot in the last couple of years. So
we saw Aaron Sabato get drafted very, very high. And he was a definitive first base DH type of player. So if Kevin Parada does this in the ACC, there's no telling how high he could go. I remember looking back at his data from 2021, and the narrative was, okay, there's a lot of things to like here. The exit velocities aren't top of the scale. Like, they're not as loud as you would probably expect them to be when you watch him play. So, if he's hitting the ball as hard as, like, Susak absolutely pounded the ball last year. If he's hitting the ball as hard as Daniel Susak did last year, as hard as he does this year, then I think Kevin Parada is going to get some of that talk in the top 8.
All right. So I want to take some time and, obviously we showed that Kevin Parada video, but we do have some guys that are grinding on the road and putting in time every single weekend, every single day, getting great videos of some of these prospects out on the field. So I want to give this opportunity to kind of spotlight a couple of those guys. Obviously, we showed the Kevin Prada video that was courtesy of Will Hoffer, but also we've got a video clip here of Thomas Harrington at Campbell. That was shot over the weekend by Tyler Jennings. So I want to give Tyler Jennings a shout out here, and we'll roll this video of Thomas Harrington here, and tell me your thoughts on. Yeah, so there we go, right there, real quick, just a one hitter, if you will, from
what an outing
from Thomas Campbell, just an absolute gem right there. We'll talk a little bit about the right-hander from Campbell.
Yeah, Harrington is a guy that a lot of scouts were very, very high on in the fall and in the spring. He touched 97. He was sitting north of 94, 95 for much of the spring and much of the fall. That velo hasn't come out yet. He's been mostly 90, 94 in his first two starts, but I mean, it's been pretty cold, so I would wait for the arm to warm up a little bit. I mean, heavy sinker guy, shows it an above average breaking ball, can really turn over a pretty quality changeup. He's got the prototype size. I think he's 6'4", 205. Really kind of just looks the part. So yeah, Thomas Harrington is a guy that we were a little, I would say, hesitant to throw up too high on our board. We wanted to see him repeat that velocity as we get here into the spring season. But I would expect that's another guy that's probably going to approach, top 3 to 5 round status. Just given the fact that he's pounding the zone, he's looked really good early on this season, and he's shown the ability to drive that velo up pretty high.
All right, and then we had Jackson Thomas, who was up at Gonzaga for the weekend series, and so he got a chance to catch some good video here, and so we'll throw this one up. So what are your thoughts? Obviously, we talked about Gonzaga a little bit earlier and how they've been able to, in recent memory, pump out some pretty good pitchers. What are your thoughts on Hughes, and what can this Gonzaga Bulldog team be this season?
Gonzaga is not the team that they were last year. Last year they had Ernie Yake. They had Brett Harris. They had a number of guys in that lineup that could really bang. They're a little bit younger this year, but the pitching staff is better than it was last year, I think. Gabriel Hughes is going to be the Friday night guy. He's been the Friday night guy. He's really interesting. I've watched a lot of Gabriel Hughes. Fastball explodes out of the hand. It's kind of an unorthodox supination release. But the slider is very interesting. He doesn't seem to have a good feel for consistency in the shape that he throws that slider. Sometimes he gets a lot of sweep. Sometimes he throws a gyro ball that dives down at the feet. But it really doesn't. I mean, he's never in the middle, right? So the ball either has a ton of sweep or the ball really just falls off the face of the earth. And then he does mix in a changeup, and he's got a curveball, but he hasn't really thrown that too much. Kind of messes with a cutter as well. The arm talent here and the athleticism on the mound, to me, looks like a top 2 or 3 round pick with projection, a guy that could probably end up throwing 97. But it's an obscure profile. It's a raw profile. He just seems like he needs more time and more training and development on the mound, because he was a two-way player last year, played first base, had pretty good juice from the left side, and then he also pitched once a week before breaking his hand. I'm excited to see what this kid can do once he gets into a full development schedule, because the attitude and their persona, I mean, I know that they're the Gonzaga Bulldogs, but he really is a bulldog on the mound. He's a fiery competitor.
And what about Kempner? I know you and I have had conversations a little bit. He's another talked about arm up there in Spokane, but concerns over whether or not he can be a starter. Is he almost certainly relegated to a bullpen role at the next level?
again, William Kempner is just a very interesting arm. He's got the pitch mix of Luis Castillo. He's got a slider that moves 16 to 20 inches, which is incredible. He's got a two-seam fastball sinker that moves 15 inches, boring in on right-handers' hands. But the command isn't there. I mean, it's below average command, and that's what's gotten him in trouble here early on in the season. He has not been great on Saturdays for Gonzaga. I still like him more as a deceptive, funky, explosive reliever at the back end of someone's bullpen. And that way you can go a little bit more at max effort and be a unique look and throw more quality strikes than he would be expected to throw over 4 or 5 innings. So ultimately, to answer your question, yes, I think he's kind of a mid-leverage reliever role at the next level.
All right, so we got about 10 minutes left before we'll get out of here. One question that I did get from Twitter before we went on the air, and this pertains a little bit more to future draft classes. I know we focus a lot on this year's draft class, but we do want to give some time to those future draft classes, and certainly those guys that are showing out regardless of what age they are in college. The show is geared towards college baseball, and so we're going to give some time to those guys that are performing well, regardless of whether they're eligible to be drafted in 2022, 2023, 2024. But it was Greg Zumak at Ivy Futures on Twitter that actually pointed this out. And I guess this was more of a statement made by him, but I'm going to turn it into a question. Obviously, Tommy White and his performance is leading the way from all freshmen and really leading the way throughout all of college baseball. But what about some of the other impactful names like a Hagen Smith, a Thatcher Hurd, Chase Burns, Josh Hartle? Of the freshman guys, right? We're talking guys that are maybe, if they are a sophomore going to be eligible to be drafted in 2023. But for the most part, we're talking about 2024 draft eligible kids here. Anyone from the freshman ranks not named Tommy White that has sort of impressed you early on this season?
Yeah, so Santee City hit with the comment right away. Braden Montgomery, right fielder at Stanford. He'll be a 2024. He looked dynamite this weekend. I mean, the box score won't fill it up, but this is a guy that we had in the top 50 period for 2021. I mean, we thought he was going to be, we thought he was a top 50, like a fringe day one value. Ultimately, it's extremely difficult to pay someone away from a Stanford commitment for good reason. It's an incredible institution. But Braden Montgomery, I mean, on the mound, he's been up to 94. At the plate, he looks really good. I mean, the swing is beautiful. He hit the ball pretty hard this week, but didn't get too much to show for it. I think Braden Montgomery might end up being one of the best players in the 2024 class. And I'm excited to see where it goes. Alex Mooney at Duke and Jonathan Santucci at Duke, both of those guys have looked very good. Alex Mooney's been the best hitter for an anemic Duke offense thus far, kind of batting right in the middle there. He's their shortstop. He's got a pretty good chance to go in the first round a few years from now. I think Jackson Baumeister, we've talked about him before at Florida State. I expect him to be pitching in the rotation by the end of the year. Right-hander, 6'6", up to 97, dynamic slider. Really a good-looking player. Tommy White is a very interesting case study. It's gonna look like if he stays anywhere close to this pace,
which he can't. Let's be clear, he cannot.
I was about to write a feature article on whether or not he can hit 206 RBIs like he's on pace to do.
But you can't. I mean, you're not SEO won't do anything. It's a 5-word article.
Yeah,
he cannot do it.
But my point is, if he even maintains the fame, if he does enough to maintain the Tommy Tanks, the Thomas the Tank Engine thing, watching where he goes in I'm pretty sure he's 2024. Watching where he goes in 2024, I think will be interesting, because on one end, he's a right-handed hitting first baseman with not a ton of projection left in the body, but obviously the power is there to all fields.
Right.
Is he an Aaron Sabato, Kevin Parada? I'll throw it out there. Spencer Torkelson. Is he just that prodigious of a right-handed bat that we're going to see him drafted in the top 10, top 12 of the first round? Or will he slow up enough to where some fan base is going to be absolutely juiced to get him in the second round because, hey, we got Tommy Tanks, we got Big Fly Tommy, but he's limited to first base, so maybe he falls to the second round. He'll just be an interesting case study to watch over the next few years. I am really excited to get batted ball data for the 2022 season. I'll get that here in a few weeks once the sample size gets a little bit bigger. I got to know how hard this kid is hitting the ball because these are absolute missiles to center field. No doubt shots.
All right, well, let's take a look at one of them right here.
And White puts a charge into this one. It is high. It is deep. And he has done it again, ladies and gentlemen. Tommy White. Oh, my goodness. I don't think I need to tell you where it went. Tommy White straight back to center field, a little bit off to the right. But Tommy White with a 3-run bomb.
Straight out a little bit to the right. Sounds like my driver on the first tee. How about you, Joe?
That's all of his homers, though. They all go just right of the batter's eye. It's an incredibly impressive approach. I think the most fun thing about Tommy White is we covered him for 14 months leading up to the 2021 draft. And, we interviewed him. We did a 15-minute segment with him. And if you even mentioned the idea of him moving off third base, he would quickly correct you. I'm a third baseman. Well, he's at first base now, so I mean that ended up being the case, but he was this baby-faced kind of, still had the baby fat, just kind of this lovable guy. This was just 8 months ago.
Right.
And now full beard, smokes a pack a day, 4 kids at home, has to bring home firewood to warm the family at night. Like this dude is he's a caricature. Like it's incredible.
Do you think Tommy White mows the lawn with his shirt off at home on the weekends?
I think Tommy White mows the lawn with a machete.
We need to ask him. Have you ever mowed the lawn? And do you use a sit down? No.
Do you use a scythe?
I use a machete. I call the Grim Reaper, and he edges, and I mow the lawn.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Pretty cool story.
All right, so a couple of minutes left here before we get out of here. One question I want to ask you: a lot of good action this weekend.
Yeah,
a lot of good action this coming weekend. I'm really excited about. Look, I'm excited for Kevin Parada. I think this Georgia Bulldog team is exciting. A lot of SEC teams in that top 25 that we saw earlier. We can pull up this graphic again and look at the top 25 here. Georgia coming in at number 15 and Georgia Tech at number 18. Those teams will square off this weekend. So that's what I'm really excited for and what I'm really looking forward to. What is it that you are looking forward to this weekend, week 3 here, Joe?
I'm going to be probably watching the Shriners Children's College Classic from Friday to Sunday. I don't think I'm going to turn it off. There's a lot of good games this weekend, but when you have a 6-team tournament that goes on for 3 days, hosted on MLB Network, you get Baylor, LSU, Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and UCLA in a round-robin tournament. I mean,
all night.
Look at LSU, Texas, Tennessee, Oklahoma. I mean, the first few weeks of any season can be slow because you get the Floridas taking on the Jacksonvilles. You get yada, yada, yada. This is a big boy tournament. And this is the type of tournament that, we can throw all these superlatives out about, oh, this guy improved his draft stock. Oh, that guy improved his draft stock. If you're a guy like David Sandlin or Chaz Martinez at Oklahoma and you go toss a gem against LSU or Tennessee or Jake Brooks at UCLA, and you do that to an LSU or a Tennessee or a Texas, that can write a narrative for an entire season with scouts in the stands. Every scouting director will be at this showcase. It's the premier showcase, frankly, of the college baseball season, short of Omaha.
And if you're a fan of the long ball, I mean, look, Tennessee leads the nation in home runs, which might come as a surprise to a lot of people because you talk about NC State, but Tennessee obviously put up a 64 burger over the weekend against Iona. So,
and this is a big league ball. This is a big league ballpark, Kris. Like we're talking, I know there's the Crawford boxes, and that certainly comes into play. But if you're a left-handed hitter and you hit a ball out to right field, or you're if you're a Tommy White, I know they're not playing in it, but if you're a guy that hits the ball out to center field and you hit a ball out to center field at Minute Maid, that catches people's attention.
Right.
You're not just popping a ball over the right field fence at Ole Miss. You're crushing a baseball if you get it out of these pro parks. So I'm really excited to see what can happen here. This is going to be the third weekend in a row that Oklahoma and Peyton Graham are going to be playing at the ballpark in Arlington or Minute Maid Park. They have not played in a college stadium on the weekend yet.
Anywhere else. Also interesting to see next year's potential number 1 overall pick, Dylan Cruz at LSU.
Yeah.
He'll be there in that tournament. Interesting to see what he can do in that pro stadium. So certainly a lot of good action there in that tournament. That starts on Friday, correct?
Yeah, March 4th through March 6th. And with 6 teams, it's going to be, you're probably going to get 3 games a day for 3 days.
All right. So real quick, we're going to get out of here. One last question here. I want to talk about this from Santee City, give you the opportunity to talk about Ben Joyce here at Tennessee.
Yeah, Ben Joyce. I'm not exactly sure that scouts know exactly what Ben Joyce is yet. I can tell you he's a reliever. It's a long arm stroke. There's some effort. It's not a lot of effort for 103. I'll tell you that much, though. I genuinely think he's Kendall Graveman. I think he's Kendall Graveman. I don't think the fastball quality is as good as Kendall Graveman, which is kind of weird to say. There's not a lot of movement on his 103. So listen, if you were to ask me today, I think Ben Joyce is a 3rd round pick, maybe early 4th round pick, someone's 3rd or 4th pick in the draft. I think he has the potential to save someone some money as a reliever profile. But this is the type of profile that you draft as a contender, and he's in your bullpen at the end of the year in September. It's truly special arm talent. The breaking ball has a long ways to go, but if he can even find the strike zone with it, if he can just find the strike zone with that breaking ball, hitters are going to have to be so geared up for 101 to 103 that they have no chance at a slider.
Could you envision a scenario where a small market team without a lot of draft, without a lot of caps, not cap space,
bonus pool money?
Bonus pool money.
Okay.
Could you envision a scenario where a small market team without a lot of pool money, maybe like you said, reaches on them a little bit earlier just so that they can save some money?
I mean, I think every team generally spends all of their bonus pool. So it's just a matter of how you want to distribute that money out over 10 to 20 rounds. I think the more appealing route would be a team like Chicago, the White Sox, drafting like a Mikey Romero in the 1st round or a really talented high school player in the 2nd round and having to overpay to get, or like let's say the White Sox take like a Jackson Ferris because he drops to wherever they're picking. And they got to overpay him to keep him away from college. I think the interesting idea is you overpay some kid $500,000 to $900,000 to sign with you. We got to make that money up somewhere. So maybe they do, instead of the $800,000 or $900,000 that's owed to a 4th round pick or a 3rd round pick in Ben Joyce, you get him for $500,000 and you get a little bit closer to going to not going over budget. So that would be my guess. I'm going to guess he's like the 1st or 2nd reliever off the board this year. And I would imagine he's going to be a money saving measure for a team that takes a high profile high schooler in the 2nd round.
All right. Appreciate the questions, Santee City. Appreciate the questions from everyone today on the show. Great stuff again, as always. We really do appreciate the interaction from you guys. And so keep the questions coming. Again, check out the top 300 prospects at prospectslive.com. You can get a look at all of these guys. Great write-ups on there as well. You can subscribe for as little as $5. Get some good bonus content over at Patreon. But Joe, again, appreciate the time. We'll be back next week. Again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Joe on Twitter. If you have some ideas or some things that you'd like for us to address next week, we can certainly look into that and try to get some of that stuff on the show for you. But until next time, for my co-host Joe Doyle, I am Kris Dunn. Thank you again for tuning in to week 2 of the MLB Draft Weekend Review. Take care, everybody.